Does it sound okay?
Yeah, I think so.
I turned my VR headset on and everything got weird for a second, but hopefully it's okay now.
Yeah, how's the sound, LFQ? Are we good?
I think okay. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think we're good.
We got dual chat on the screen. We're professionals.
Yo! All right, it's good now? Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. What's up, gamers? Good morning. Hope everyone's having a, good evening, LFQ. But yeah, dude, we are definitely not the pro streamers. We're trying. We're getting better.
We get one per stream. That was our one.
You should have seen the first 6 months early streams. We had some crazy shit going on.
Oh, we used to like go through Skype or everything was on Discord. But I don't know, crazy.
Had a bunch of different, solutions, and then Omni helped us figure some shit out, and that's what we've been using now.
I did see a statement the other day, and it's the same shit that we've always been looking into, but there's a thing called like Riverside FM that is a product that's primarily for podcasts. When you have like a guest on a podcast, you can kind of do the same thing that we're doing right now and remotely have a conversation and record it or stream it or whatever, but it costs a decent amount of money, which is the main reason that we've never switched to it. But it's like, if we were trying to pay for this, I think it would completely solve all of our problems. So maybe someday. But yeah, maybe me and Omni always talked about like building something ourselves too, and I always thought that sounded fun. So
hell yeah. Well, we want to show Hyperskate stuff today and talk about it. Popular request from you guys last week, so we're gonna do that. But I want to hop into just a little bit of game industry news before we get in there. Let some people trickle in. Fill up the chat a little bit. Let's see. We could start with what should we start with?
They are re-releasing Gex 1 through 3.
There you go. Yeah, Gex is back, boys. Tony's very excited. He didn't even know until
I didn't even know until yesterday. Yeah, totally. So, but that is very exciting. Gex Enter the Gecko, which I think is technically Gex 2. We were doing some research on this yesterday. But I played the shit out of that on N64, and I had a little bit of like reptileism when I was a kid. So any video game that had like a gecko as the main character, I didn't really care what it actually was. I just wanted to play that game. And I remember Gex was only on PlayStation for a long time, and at the time I didn't have a PlayStation, so I would go to the game rental store and I would always see this game with this gecko on the cover, and I was like, I have to play that game. And then eventually it came out on N64, and I was so excited.
Hell yeah, bro. I want to say I played Enter the Gecko too, because I liked reptiles as well. That's just how it goes. But yeah, it was interesting. I
in fact had a pet gecko named Gex from when I was 8 years old until about when I went to college. That dude lived so long, and like eventually went and lived in my little brother's room because I was moving out of the house, and he was still going. It was a leopard gecko.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exciting. That might be just one that we throw in the pile of things to play on stream when we don't have a better idea. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, sounds good, bro. If my machine gets weird or anything, I opened Unreal and it's like doing some shader stuff. So that's what's going on there. So if I like break up or anything, that's what's going on.
We can go ahead and talk about Marathon though.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought this was really interesting. We talked about it yesterday. Bungie issued a statement saying that Marathon's delayed. It's not going to ship on September 27th, and that they're going to take some time to work on the game, and they haven't announced a release date. Every single article reporting on it said Marathon is delayed indefinitely. I got into a conversation with Omni about it, and like Tony and I looked up some articles too, and we found the same thing, that pretty much everyone's saying it's delayed indefinitely.
On the screen right now, I've just typed Marathon into Twitter. Here's the first post. Bungie's Marathon has been delayed indefinitely. Marathon has been delayed from Paul Tassi. He didn't say indefinitely. Props to him. Almost everybody else has. So
the weird thing is that
Jeff Keighley, Marathon has been delayed indefinitely.
Yep.
So
but he showed the actual thing. Like click on the thing under Paul Tassi's tweet if you scroll up a bit. It's got the actual like community or like the messaging, the official messaging. In here, it doesn't say indefinitely anywhere. It says they're going to work on things. They're going to improve things based on feedback. But because of that, they don't know when it's going to come out. When they say, like, when people say something is delayed indefinitely, that usually means we'll never release. And that's what I think is really weird about this discourse. It feels like a lot of rage bait and people going like, see, I told you game's dead. Like, blah, blah.
Like you could say,
we don't
Anthem
know.
was kind of an indefinite because they kind of went like, we have to figure out what we're going to do before we can do it. And that didn't really put any sort of like end goal in place for them. This feels like they're still going to try to get this out, but they just don't know exactly how long it's going to take yet.
Bungie has to get this game out.
There's an $80 billion acquisition purely because of this game. They don't give a shit about Destiny. They're looking forward to the next thing that's going to make them $1 billion. So
yeah. So like, I just think it's weird. It's again more like, we talked to you guys a little bit about the marathon videos that we made, and it's just, there's only negativity around this game, which I think is really weird. But also Bungie made an official statement saying that like the reception was positive or something like that. They saw like signs of early adoption and whatnot. And I'm like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? And then you delay your game. It's all very strange.
Yeah, so Alpha Test created an opportunity for us to calibrate and focus the game on what will make it uniquely compelling.
Yep. It's I think this is a perfectly normal response. I think this is good that they're delaying. Oh, September 23rd release. It wasn't the 27th. But yeah, they're
down here. I thought was pretty interesting because throughout the entire alpha, there was a lot of criticisms aimed specifically at a handful of things like the visuals and the lack of prox chat and the missing marathon aliens and lore and game feel and all of that. And I just like, and they kind of pushed back almost every single time, like in real time as that stuff was coming out, and kind of had reasons for why it was the way that it was, or we're not going to do prox chat because we don't think it's good. And it just, I think it's interesting because now this list is literally a comprehensive summary of all the things that people were complaining about. And now they're saying, we're going to fix all of this. And, you know, they're not even saying we're going to try prox chat, which is what they always said before. They just said, we're going to add prox chat so social stories can come to life, which is interesting because they're acknowledging that like social stories wouldn't have been able to come to life in the same way without it. But they're like really doubling down on not doing it. So I don't know. This is interesting. But if they do all of this, like, I think it would be good.
Yeah,
like,
I
all
totally
of this
agree.
Seems really positive. So
yeah, I see this as a very positive press release, directly addressing the things that people had problems with, saying that we're going to do something to make these happen. Great. This is all good stuff. This is all positive. And I think the reason why it would take so long to issue a press release like this is because Bungie has to negotiate with their parent company, Sony. Sony could very much be like, no, you released
this one. They might have told him, you're putting that shit out on September 23rd in whatever state it's in. And, you know, we'd have another Concord on our hands, but they might have done that. So
yeah, that's a death sentence for the studio. So for whatever it's worth, it appears that Sony still has some faith in Bungie to right the ship and fix these things. That's all very positive for the future of Marathon. So I don't know. I really, it bothers me. Like the discourse around this game generally bothers me. I felt like I was trying to give honest takes and, you know, everything taken out of context as it always is on the internet. It's just weird. People want to hate this. People want to see another Concord 2. There's too much negativity. So it's just crazy shit. So I think this is good. This is positive. We'll see where it goes. We don't know when Marathon's going to come out. I think that's perfectly fine.
If you had to just like finger to the wind bullshit estimation, like how much more time do you think they're going to take?
I would say like summer 2026 or spring 2026. It's going to be like, if
so minimum 6 months, probably closer to a year.
Yeah, totally. Okay. Because if they only use 6 months, there's not a lot you can change in that amount of time.
We've already had that discussion. Yeah, totally.
They have to make a whole plan and figure out how they're going to implement this stuff. For it, some insight for you guys, prox chat and like toxic gamer culture was always a really hot topic at Bungie when I was there. There were a lot of people in leadership. They've since moved into different roles on different projects, exited the company, whatever. But there was this prevailing mentality that allowing players to freely communicate with each other over voice comms was not something that Bungie could regulate. They didn't want to, build a system by which they would ban people based on voice chat, whatever, shit like that. They didn't want to get into it. So they were like, nah, we're just going to make it safe by preventing this from even happening. On the flip side,
like they don't go like no voice chat if that's the case, because it's like it seems equally as likely that you just get a teammate who's being shittery and is gonna just like come in and like start screaming slurs into the mic at you. Like that's just as likely to happen as somebody on the other team doing it.
100%.
So, yeah.
And if you look at games like Call of Duty, it's done literally nothing to harm the player base. It doesn't matter. It's just how gamers are. I understand you're trying to keep people safe and have like a family-friendly experience. I get it, but at the same time, I think it's just silly to pretend that that's not how the internet works and that's not how people are. People are like that. People are gonna, when you have anonymity of internet communications, people are gonna be shitty to each other. That's just how it goes. But it was not something that ever really like bothered me as a kid, or like I say kid, but I mean like, early 20s, late teens. It was just normal.
Yeah, that's great. Family friendly shooting each other.
Exactly, dude. Exactly. That's what I loved about OG Bungie is, the reason they chose to make Covenant blood purple or blue was because of that. Because they were like, well, we don't want to make it like human violence. It's okay if you're killing aliens because the aliens are trying to exterminate all humans. Like, cool. That makes sense. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
In Marathon, you're not even shooting humans. You're shooting robots and you're shooting like synthetic, like Blade Runner, skin job type shit, like whatever, right? So I don't know. It's
clankers, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Motherfucking clankers, Roger type shit. But yeah, it's
how does Valorant? I know, like I famously heard like Valorant players will get in trouble for stuff they say on voice chat.
Yeah,
and I think it's that Riot maybe is actually recording all voice chat in game and then can use it to review and determine bans and stuff. Yeah.
Riot famously has very intrusive anti-cheating and community policing tools. They went at it like from the very beginning to be like, we're going to allow this, but we're going to punish people for saying shit that is like just pointlessly toxic. You can catch temporary bans or disciplinary action in Valorant if you're playing in ranked and purposely griefing the team, which I think makes sense. It's a competitive game.
Hyper competitive game.
Yeah, there's like esports and ranked shit. It's what the game is meant for. Marathon's not that. Destiny was never that. So I just don't understand. Yeah, I think the whole argument of like, no, we got to keep people safe from each other on voice comms is silly. Allow people to easily mute it or turn it off. That's the thing.
And report people and have a good community modding system. Like, maybe not as deep as Valorant goes. That seems like that would take a lot of resources to monitor and upkeep and stuff. But, there's probably some good examples to follow there. And
yep.
Not to get us off topic, but have you heard about all the Valorant like cheating drama that's been happening?
I've heard in the past. I don't know if there's anything current.
Recently, there's a lot of speculation that a lot of teams are like colluding with each other and like throwing matches and like it's like old like mob boxing type shit. Like people will like get a message from somebody that's like, "Hey, I'll give you 10 grand to throw this next Valorant match," and they're like, "All right."
That's crazy.
It's crazy. Honestly, yeah. There's a whole. If you're interested in this, there is a. I want to say it's like a Ludwig third channel Ludwin video where he just like was going through all of it. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see. I mean, like anytime people are betting on shit, sports betting in general, obviously, like Gamba's not good. It's not good for human brains. I've talked about it a bunch.
And he just talked about how there's only 10 top tier teams or whatever that are in like a league that like compete with each other, but then there's like a league underneath them that has like 250 teams in it or something like that are kind of like silver league or whatever. And I guess the cheating is super bad in like that secondary league because like obviously the big pro league with like the big purses and stuff, they take it pretty seriously and nobody is like trying to fuck around, but you have a lot of like matches that are just kind of like hosted online that have like smaller prize pools and stuff like that. But then there's a side of it where like you can start betting on these Valorant matches now as like an observer and like put money down on what team you think is going to win and stuff. And so yeah, there's a lot of incentive for throwing matches and all sorts of stuff, fixing games.
Hey, what's up, Bitmap? Welcome. Thank you for chatting in YouTube. We got a person in there. That's awesome.
We got 2 now.
Oh, LFQ, don't say oomphy, bro. Yeah, so I mean, I have Riot Vanguard running on my machine too, so I know what that's like. It's interesting, and I mean, I feel like there's always scandals in esports. It's so weird. I like esports. I think it's in a really weird place. This is more like big corporations not understanding what gamers are. And like what gamers are interested in, and it's all very funky. I like the approach that Riot takes to esports, but I could also see Riot like finding that to not be profitable and not like really growing in that way. Yeah, Bitmap. Usually we cover the news a little bit around the game industry on Wednesday, and then we get into game dev. Well, let's keep cranking through stuff. I just realized we burned like 20 minutes talking about news. Let's talk about Borderlands, the collector's edition. That shit's really funny.
Okay, that one I think is right here.
Yeah, Bitmap. That's actually a good point. We were talking about cheating. I mean, you even have people like Dr. Lupo cheating in a chess tournament. Like, what the fuck? That's crazy.
For like literally no reason.
Yep. Ego was the reason. Yep. He even said it. And like that's a huge bummer. For what it's worth, Lupo is now back to streaming somewhat regularly.
He's on right now.
Yep, and he's playing Tarkov. What I noticed is that he switched his webcam setup so that it's all pointing at his back and his screens now.
Like 100% of the time?
Yes. So like
really?
His camera's all pointed at his screens now so that you can see if he's cheating.
We're just going to pop in here and take a look real quick. Oh yeah, look at that.
Yes, LFQ. Okay, so yeah, the Borderlands Collector's Edition doesn't include the fucking game, and it's like $250 or whatever, $150. Yep. So crazy. You got to buy the game on top of it. So yeah, if you
would be paying in the game, the other thing that we have in here is that the game is not $80 after all. It's $70.
Yep. After the Randy Pitchford like talking shit about people saying real fans will pay $80 for it, they had to walk that back. I'm just sure.
Like all the headlines are like, "Oh, the drama was for nothing. Borderlands is $70," and I'm just like, $70 is still almost $80. Like, I don't feel any better about the price at $70. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. So they're doing some silly shit over there. LFQ. Yeah. Read the room. Exactly. Yeah. I do think it's weird how the games journalism, machine is now like championing Borderlands, saying there was no drama. This is silly. That's not like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? There was absolutely drama. It was real. Of course, that made them change the pricing model. It's insane that they still have this collector's edition that doesn't even include the game.
This collector's edition is stupid too, because it's like, give me the statue and give me the game, and I don't care about any of this other stuff. Like,
yep.
Everybody wants the statue and they want the game, and they don't want to pay $150 for the statue. They want to pay $150 for the game and the statue.
But digital art book, man, real value. I think that's the lamest shit. We've talked about.
I'd rather buy this right here.
Wait, you'd rather buy which?
The Wilder helmet.
Oh yeah, dude. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
This is a real scale Wilder helmet that you could wear.
Or the BB Collector's Edition from Death Stranding would be sick as fuck too.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Well,
or
this one is like the kaiju thing, right? The new one.
Yeah, that's the Magellan or whatever. Yeah. I think that's weird. I don't want the Magellan statue. I'd rather have BB. There was Asako Kojima tweeted a thing about like Japanese toy manufacturer that was making an enemy that looked really cool. It's like this red mecha type shit, and it looked like one of the Higgs cronies or whatever. And I was like, this is fucking awesome. We're never going to get that because people don't buy that shit in the United States, I guess. I don't know why those things don't ever come to the market here. The PoE Katava plush, sick, dude. Yeah, I mean, like, I got collectors type shit everywhere, you know. I got this and all kinds of, there's a bunch of shit over there you guys can't see, but I used to love that stuff. I have too much of it now, honestly.
Since we're talking about Kojima, I'm just going to keep going down Kojima things.
Yeah.
So he's been praising the Claire Obscure team because everybody keeps talking about how they have 33 team members and a dog, supposedly. And he's saying that he feels like that's the perfect size team because Kojima Productions is now over 200 developers. The thing that sticks out to me about this is that the Sandfall guys have come out and said our team is much larger than 33 people, and we think it's kind of harmful to the industry that this rumor keeps getting perpetuated by people. So it's a little unfortunate to see a big guy like Kojima also perpetuating it when supposedly it's not true. They just say it took a lot more than 33 people to make Claire Obscure. So
I also feel like this is probably taken out of context and written in a way to make it seem as though Kojima's glazing the same thing. But he's probably like, oh yeah, I could see why they would have a core team of 30. Like, you know, he's been doing this for a long time. So he's probably like, yeah, that's a much smaller team. It's better. But yeah, the Samfall guys didn't just have a team of 30. They also contracted a bunch of people. There were a lot of people that came in and contributed to the project. It was
actually
like
says it right here. So it should be noted that there's been some debate as to what counts as the total size of Claire Obscure's development team. While the game's credits do list around 30 to 40 staff working at Sandfall, it also lists numerous other outsourced animation, QA, and performance capture staff that bring the total number of people involved in the game well into the hundreds. As such, some have argued that while the game was made with a smaller team than most AAA titles, the claim that a hugely praised game is only made with a small team of 30 to 40 people isn't an entirely accurate one.
Yep.
But to that point, like Kojima's core internal team is probably over 200 developers based on this statement, and it sounds like Sandfall is a core team of about 30 to 40 people. So
yeah. And I mean, that makes sense. I would agree with that sentiment. Like, core team of that size is great. You know, I always thought like 50-ish would probably be the best. It's probably a little too high, but in that I would be incorporating, you know, contractors and third parties and stuff like that. So anyway, the other interesting thing is that the, you know, music composer Woodkid, the musical artist, did an interview saying that Kojima did some early testing of Death Stranding 2. And through that testing, Kojima was like, we got a lot of positive stuff, which is problematic because it's not making people feel things. They're just saying this game is good, cool.
Yeah, and specifically, everybody liked it, and he didn't want every single person to like it.
And I think he's right in that. The reason I say that is because in Destiny, I did a thing with Saint 14 for the Curse of Osiris expansion. Saint 14 never existed in the Destiny games until that point. And I made a mission that, in my mind, you know, the core of the experience, like the tagline or whatever, was, you know, go on a pilgrimage to the grave of Saint 14. So in the mission, you find like the mausoleum with the shrine to Saint 14 and all this shit, and he's like enshrouded there, you know, kept in this thing. There was a lot of response to that on the Destiny subreddit. And I was working with a writer to do all that stuff. And, you know, he was all on board, loved it and everything. And we did great. I liked that there was a huge response. A lot of people were sad. And that was viewed from the writer as a negative response. And so he was having this crisis. He's like, we fucked up. I don't know. And I was like, bro, there's time. We can change it. We can do other stuff. The really positive thing here is that there is an emotional reaction to this character. That's good. That means that people care. We can do something else. And so, of course, that led into Saint 14 becoming a main character in the story. He became the Trials of Osiris vendor, and like all of that shit happened because of like the response in that one mission. There was no desire at a high level, you know, from a leadership level, to put Saint 14 in the game in any capacity whatsoever. The whole reason I got to work on Curse of Osiris is because I pitched this quest to the creative lead of that team and got temporarily assigned to the expansion team working on that. So, and then of course that led to making the Whisper and 0 Hour and all that other stuff. But yeah, that's how it went.
How do you think, like, if I just think back to like all the game design stuff that we talk about and all of that, like, you know, design for fun and, you know, get your core kind of like game feel and stuff figured out first and then worry about the other stuff. Like, I can see how you would apply that to most games that you would make, but Death Stranding feels like that would be less specific, I guess. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like,
Kinda. I'm trying to follow.
like, you know, when we made Hyperskate and stuff, it's like it's got to feel fun to skate around before we do just about anything else. And in most games, like, I think there's like some core verbs that you would do that you would kind of like get dialed in and, you know, build your game around. As we've always talked about, you know, tongue in cheek or not, Death Stranding is kind of just like a walking simulator. And
Yeah.
so is it just like they just like dialed in like this walking and balancing system and then decided to build a game around it, you think? Like, it almost feels like it would have been backwards from that, I guess. I don't know.
I think so. My assumption is that Kojima's been doing this for a really long time. I think both of those things were always in his mind. So as the creative director, you know, the guy who's like running the whole thing in the vision, I assume that he goes, it's really important to nail this part of it, the walking simulator part, and I have this very specific feel I want in that, but the story I'm telling ties into it. So I would say he's probably developed that, you know, vision cohesively. Oftentimes when you see a game that you're like, this plays really well, but I don't understand the story and it doesn't seem to fit, that's because those two things were developed disparately and there wasn't a good tie for those things together. Games are really hard because that's the thing that you need to capture. You need strong vision. If you don't have the strong vision, you're not going to get an emotional reaction, and the emotional reaction matters to, you know, Mega Mocap's point. I've heard to design for emotion over generic fun. Games have to be fun, just to be meaningful in any way. Like I've talked about it before, that Dragon Cancer, you can look at that game and it's more of a game as art. I wouldn't describe any part of that Dragon Cancer as fun. That's not to say that it's a bad game or shouldn't exist or is problematic or anything like that. It's just a very specific story about a family whose child was diagnosed with like super aggressive cancer when it was like 2 years old, and like them dealing with that loss and like going through it. So it's like almost like a storybook type of a game. And the gameplay mechanics are like, rock your baby to sleep because, you know, he's on chemo or some shit like that, and it's really hard and you can't win that scenario, and you just feel that sense of hopelessness and loss. So like that's where they designed for emotion and fun. In, you know, I say fun because there's gameplay mechanics based around these really like powerful, heavy emotions that are just really painful to deal with. So it's both things, I think. I think if you issue one for the other, you're going to have a problem, and you're going to have a game that doesn't necessarily resonate. And when you have these big, powerful experiences that people are like, oh my God, that was so memorable. You could even point at Undertale, for example, right? The stories and theming are really important. The basic gameplay moments are really important. I'm not a fan of Undertale personally, but I recognize that there's solid game design in that game. And I know that the fan base is rabid for it, and they love this dude's stuff. So, you know, I think it's just a delicate balance. It takes wisdom, experience. A lot of indie devs just kind of get lucky and they find something that works. But yeah. Mega Mocap says, oh, definitely. I mean, I try to make things feel good, but I'm also trying to make things a little clunky because I'm going for a horror feel. Yeah, that's smart. I mean, like, it's both things. And I know like that sucks because it's not a simple answer. I don't have like a magic bullet for that, but that's why, like,
that's what kind of sent me down this path too, because I saw Mega Mocap's comment about like design for emotion over fun, and it's almost like backwards from what we almost always talk about, which is like find the fun and then go from there. And so, and that's kind of like why I asked what I asked, because it's like, how do you wait until you found the fun and then design for emotion? Do you just have to kind of try to keep everything in mind at the same time? Like, I don't know. Like, if you're not Kojima and you're trying to just kind of maybe follow like a more generic path forward, like, I don't know, how do you square that?
That's a hard question for me because it comes really naturally. Like, I've told you guys before, I grew up, you know, spent a lot of time just by myself in a, you know, single parent household and being a latchkey kid, you know, only child type of thing. So I just had to entertain myself. And that was like reading books, watching movies, you know, reading comic books, drawing, telling myself stories, all kinds of stuff like that. So from a very young age, I would be like, when I would doodle or like draw a character or something like that, just to entertain myself, the whole time I was doing that, I was telling myself a story about this character, and that helped inform the visual design of this character. I was really young, so I couldn't articulate it that way, but like, that's the important thing. As weird as that sounds, you got to do both things. And when you have, that's why you'll see in AAA, you'll be like, this part of the game was really cool, this part I didn't fucking get, and they don't mesh well. It's because you've got this army of people all working towards a thing. The vision can get lost because there's goals and deadlines and like commitments that are contractual with publishers and shit like that. So it's easier as an indie because you can kind of control a lot of that stuff and you have a smaller team. That's to Kojima's point about Sandfall having like a 30-person team. That makes sense. It really does. When the bigger you get, the harder it is to like steer the whole ship and like move everyone in the same direction. So smaller teams are just better at executing on a singular vision. Let's hit a couple more points. Did we do all the things? I think we did all the things.
We got all of them, man.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about this shit for a long time, but last week, you know, you guys wanted to see some Hyperskate, so I wanna get into it. I want to show you guys some Hyperskate. I'm nervous and excited to talk about a lot of the stuff that, you know, I've been saying I want to like keep close to my chest and not talk about because I don't want to spoil this stuff. But I've had some conversations with a few of you guys in DMs on Discord talking about, yo, thank you for the resub, LFQ. Talking about like my fears about what I would share. And I've like, you know, I've told Adder like the whole story of the game and like the vision that we're trying to execute on. He's like, dude, you should just talk about it on stream. Don't worry about it. So we're going to talk about it.
I'm gonna run to the restroom.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, I think I'll start in on the narrative. What Tony's showing is our prototype map. This is the 40 by 40 kilometer map. We've got a couple things here that we made in blockout tools as like, you know, ramps and pipes and stuff like that. If you look at the orange one, it's about the size of a player. So these are really big. Like the big gray one is probably like a 2-story house. So a lot of this doesn't come across in flat screen. Like playing it in VR, you get a completely different feeling for the game. So I've talked about Hyperskate as being like a Riders Republic or a Steep, you know, with like multiplayer, and it's like an action, you know, extreme sports type of a sim. The reason I was doing that is because it helps you understand the gameplay a little bit more, but that's not really what this game is at all. This game is a sci-fi, like with you know, kind of Metroidvania type of components to it for in terms of like progression. So what I mean is you have this Riders Republic type of stuff, or you know, Steep stuff where you're you know, hitting different tracks and like, you know, doing different stuff, and you have these courses and whatnot. But this is in a really big map where exploration is a key component of that. So imagine you're going to, you know, we've got certain areas that we've marked out on the map. We have these waypoints that you can teleport to. So we've got like front peak bowls, you know, sorry, it's front peak, back bowls, ramps, giant cube. We've got a bunch of different things like that. So imagine you're at front peak and you're trying to get over to back bowls. Off in the distance, you'll see this mountain range with like this big inscrutable alien structure. Think like Halo Forerunner stuff. So you have these like very, you know, harsh angles, this unnatural structure against this natural terrain. So that juxtaposition is really interesting. And these are mega structures. They're gigantic. So imagine that you
want
go
me to go to it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Feel free to explore. You can show like Burj Khalifa and all that stuff. So these are all, you know, placeholder names for these different parts of the game. So when I describe it as Burj Khalifa, it's because it's like literally the size of like Burj Khalifa. It's a massive structure and it's off on a mountain peak. Tony, if you want to go to Cube and turn around and look at it, you can see it in the map, and it's really crazy. So Giant Cube is one of these things. That's what Tony's looking at. I really like Giant Cube. It's very interesting. But you see this thing just kind of like stuck in the landscape. There, you can see Burj Khalifa in the distance. That big spire on the mountaintop. It looks like a radio tower, but that thing is actually like hundreds of stories tall, and it's just impossibly huge when you get up to it. So Giant Cube is kind of a similar thing. Now, the way this works is when you find this thing and you start exploring it, you're going from a point of all this natural terrain and you get into it, and then the vibe shifts dramatically. You go into like bespoke skate park stuff, and you have all this, harsh angled geometry, like think a pure terrain park for skating and snowboarding and whatnot. And you're exploring the space. So you go into the Giant Cube, you do some traversal puzzle things, you find some stuff, you unlock a new section of the map, you change the state of the game world. That's the vibe we're going for. Yeah, exactly. Jet Island was a big inspiration, honestly. Tony really likes Jet Island, so you hope there's a punji pit.
Jet Island is the whole reason that we started doing this.
So Mega Mocap, the concept here is when you're outside in the natural terrain, there's not really any failure conditions, and you're free to explore and do whatever. You won't get your position reset by like failing or whatever. When we get down into the infrastructure, into the technological parts of this and these mega structures, that's where you would have failure conditions. Imagine this is like the higher challenge area where like the skills that you've honed exploring the natural terrain, you now apply to a higher stakes environment to accomplish a specific goal. And when you get that goal completed, the world changes in some way. You get an upgrade to your kit. We've talked about a boost mechanic. So as you're zooming along, you have this like extra boost you can hit that makes you go even faster. And you've got a meter that would recharge based on certain mechanics. I'm trying to not talk about how we're going to do these things because I think the how is really important. And that I think is where the spoilers really lie. But trying to keep all this secret is an instinct that I had from working on big AAAs where like things get data mined and people want to know what the next thing is and they spoil shit for themselves. We have a really small audience here. So yes, this will be out on the internet. People will be able to go find it. It's likely that people will find this after we already release the game. So, there's a trade-off there. And I think that's okay. I don't really want to, I worry about it because I know that this is a big part of like spoiling it. I'm glad you like it, Mocap. So one of the things that we've been working on for technology-wise that Tony's been like really hammering on, we've been talking about world partition and a bunch of other stuff. This technology will help us make this grass and foliage look a lot better. In the trailer that we built, I hand painted a bunch of trees all over just a very small area of the map, like maybe 10% or less. And, I added like 30,000 trees just to that area, and that dramatically hit perf. So we realized we want these greebly bits. We want rocks and gravel and like trees and bushes and all that shit. And in order to make that happen and still be performant, because in VR you need high frame rate for the game to actually like feel good because it changes the feel for the player. Mocap, that's exactly it. I want to keep the what these things look like a secret and how this shit works. But yeah, dungeon is a good way to explain it. This is where like my work from Destiny kind of like carries over. You've got expected gameplay and then secrets hidden in plain sight. That's the point. So you see giant structure, you're like, fuck, I want to go over to that and see what that's all about. Get up to it and you find out that there's like a way in. Tony, I know you were showing Giant Cube. It's probably easier if we can get back over there at some point. If you look at Giant Cube, whenever Tony's able to kind of frame this, and you could go into it too if you want to try that, Tony.
Yeah, I'll stay in third person.
Yeah, no worries, man. Take your time. So what Tony's going to try to do, this is sort of a proof of concept for the moments that I was talking about. So you see there's that blue sort of division about a third of the way up on the cube on the side. That's actually a ledge you can get onto. So the goal is you see this and you're like, well, shit, I wonder if I can get up there. Sure enough, there's a ramp that's very clearly saying, get up here and do this thing, right? See what's up here. Tony yeets into the sky. Did you get it?
A little bit. No, I gotta try again.
Okay, no worries. I'm really glad you like this, mocap. So thank you for the positive reinforcement. But yeah, so you would find this big thing. They all have a different sort of traversal puzzle to get into, and then once you're inside, you go on this like challenge run to complete an objective in there. I'm glad you like it too, LFQ. So yeah, these are things that we've been developing for a very long time. This has always been a core part of the vision for the game. If you guys want to think about it in terms of like Jet Island, you know, Tony was like, hey, I kind of wanted to just like replicate this and see what I could do. And I was like, here's the game we build around this. And so this is where I got into like the deep lore of stuff. I wrote a story for it. I want to read you guys some of that story because I think it's vague enough to not like.
I'm not hitting this hard enough.
That's okay. Keep going, bro. You're doing fine. Don't even worry about it. Mega Mocap says, I'm going to tell my friends one of my favorite memories of VR was playing through Jet Island with a buddy. Yes, dude. That's a thing we wanted to capture. So
that's 100% the goal here. Yep.
Yeah, Mocap, if you like for real, if you want to play it, this is up on Steam now. It's not super deep. It's very early prototype stage. Coming from AAA, especially at Bungie, there was always this mentality of share often, share early. And that helps you kind of like really figure out where your things are good and when they're bad. And if you get all the way to the end and then just say, here's my completed thing, then people, you know, might look at it and be like, whoa, this doesn't fit, or this is weird. And now you have to do a ton of pivoting. So we've always been, at least as a team, sharing things early and often and really just talking about stuff and figuring out where to go. So anyway, Mocap, if you want to play it, we have a build up on Steam. It's a very old build, but we just ask that you sub to Twitch, YouTube, and you're in our Discord. So let me drop some links for you if that's something you're interested in. The reason we do that is because it's easier for us to track who has a key. And that's important for a variety of reasons. But that way we stick a name directly next to each key that we give out to people. We've probably given out about 10.
You should probably talk about this ball I'm standing on too.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that Tony did early prototype was basically using player capsule with some friction mechanics to make the surfing feel really good. But we had some problems on some harsher edges of geometry. You would bump or come to a complete stop, and it just really ruined the flow. So
pretty much using, like, for anybody who knows Unreal, we were using a normal character movement component in flying mode, and then just having like gravity applied so that it was constantly being pushed down. But like Ben said, the capsule would catch on verts and edges and stuff all the time. And so a big shout out to Prismatica Dev for inspiring me to try this kind of like ball based locomotion system that kind of, it creates a lot of like inertia and like momentum that feels a little more natural, which is nice. But it also has the benefit of never ever getting caught on anything. It just rolls over like a wheel. So
the ball motion controller was a refactor that Tony has been doing over the last couple months, and the game feel is dramatically improved with it. So it's really, really good. We've got a little more dialing in to go with to really make it right, but this is a huge step forward in the game feel, and it makes it awesome. There's a couple questions that I want to answer. Regarding the story, we talk about how it is delivered. I'm thinking, is it explained to the character? Is it written in the game or some other way? Okay, so this is a good question that I like a lot. I've talked about how it's really important to write a story and you carefully omit details and the way that the story is presented. I don't enjoy diegesis in terms of narrative in video games because then it becomes like a movie. And it's like, well, I'm not really playing and someone's like yapping at me about what is happening. I'd rather experience it for myself. So I refer to that, and it's been referred to as diegetic gameplay. So what I mean here is, let me read you something real quick. Okay, so this first paragraph that I wrote is called Awakening. A machine clicks. The clicks roll into a subtle hum. More clicks turn to humming, the throng a gentle whirring white noise. Subroutines begin to execute simple instructions. Ancient dust stirs, but not enough to impede the perfect mechanisms as their individual rhythms build to a song of life. Motes drift into the air and catch the dim light. A spark becomes a dream of consciousness. The consciousness awakens. So that for me, when I wrote that, this is the vision I have for the player starting the game. So it's a weird abstraction, but stay with me here. I wrote that to help me understand what we're making and to help the team understand what the targets are for the experience for the beginning of the game. So this is like, think about Breath of the Wild when Link wakes up in the cave and gets the tablet. That's what this is. So I've written punctuated moments through the whole plot of the game and how it will play out. And I can read you guys some more of this stuff. That's probably the shortest one. The second one is called The Door in the Wall. And that goes, I came upon a great wall and followed it for a time. Looking across the expanse of peaks and gullies, I felt the isolation that a barren, dusty land imparts to the overseer. As my thoughts wandered, I saw an irregularity in the shape of imposing vertical structure. My focus sharpened, curiosity piqued. The great rectangle had an equally great inset, an impossibly large seam in the smooth surface. Suddenly I thought, is there a way in? That's the player discovering something like the giant cube and then trying to figure out how they open that up and what they get into. So what I'm telling is like, this is the fucking player story. These are the emotions I want them to have, all of that. Now, the way that comes across in the game, no one's going to be reading this to you. No one's going to be like, you know, there's not going to be some voiceover just chatting away, telling you what you're feeling. We're going to make those things in the game apparent to the player to elicit these emotions that follow the narrative I wrote, if that makes sense. I found it's the best way to go. The best shit that I've made, I've done this way. I've written these things out. Not like, I would say 10% of it makes its way to the player, but it just really informs what the game is like, you know? So I've always talked about it as like, this is really important to do. This is where you should go. Tasteless Unk says, do you think it's feasible for a small dev team to do what they do at Valve where they have playtests every week? Yes, we do that. We haven't done a lot of playtests recently, but yes, we do that. When we make major changes to gameplay, we playtest. We usually have a standing Friday playtest, or, you know, Tony and I just play through the week. So Tony built a new feature that I think is really cool. We have grinding in Hyperskate. So there is a rail system that he built.
I'll go to that here soon. But
yeah, no worries. You don't need to rush to it. But so an important piece is like, Tony's like, I built this. I think it feels good. I need you to play it. Tell me what you think. So that's where we're at. And that's constant play testing. It's just a part of making the game. And yeah, it's very feasible. I've always said devs need to play their game. And this should be mandatory for every team member. If you're in production, marketing, if you're an engineer, if you're a designer especially, everyone needs to play the game, because then you understand what the game is like. And everyone has a very different and valid gameplay perspective. Some players are going to like it, some players won't. If a player doesn't like it and they are honest with you about what they don't like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to change the game to, you know, go for that one player. Like the Kojima thing that we were talking about, he said that the game wasn't divisive enough. It wasn't making people feel things. They were like, this is good. Yes, that's the point. If you have players that say, this isn't for me, I don't understand it, you know, I think Christina was a good example. We had Christina play some Hyperskate, and she was struggling with certain things, comfort, basic controls and whatnot. And that helped us understand that, like, well, we know that we're not hitting her as a target because she's not the audience. She's not who we want to go for. So it makes sense that she wouldn't necessarily resonate with Hyperskate. Cool. That's a good point of feedback. Link, you must shred. Exactly, mocap. Yeah. Adder says, yo, what's up, Adder?
Yo.
Oh, also Hyperon. Sorry, man. Yo, what's up? I like your little robot spaceman guy. I keep calling it a robot or a spaceman and fucking it up. So sorry, man. No, it's cool. Love having you here. Adder says, I'm on a 15-person core team, 30 total, including contractors and businesses. We have weekly internal and external playtests. Yeah, I think once a week is probably pretty good. Find it to be critically important for the entire team to playtest the game from initial prototype all the way through ship. Yes, based. We are all game developers, even if we individually have our specialties that layer on top. exactly. That's exactly what I was saying. That said, it requires a lot of discipline by everyone on the team to diligently maintain quality, playable content with all the work we submit. Every dev on the team carries the weight of keeping the game playable and auditing the work. Exactly. Yeah, LFQ, emotional storytelling. I hope you like the words I chose. I was stumbling over my own fucking written words, and I didn't practice this beforehand, so I'm just reading you guys like stuff I wrote, a year ago. So it is the way it is. Let's see. I'll read you one more thing because this covers the beginning of the game. This one's titled Maintenance Facility. The interior space beyond the great door was mostly in shadow. My eyes were still able to clearly make out details in the dimness. Odd. It should be too dark to see without more light. Lengths of conduit drew my attention, and I obeyed the same instincts that urged me to follow the great wall to the door. I came to a strangely shaped box along the wall, at about the height of my chest. The surface of the box illuminated in a shape that matched my hand. I was driven by animal urges to reach out and touch the surface, matching my hand to the illuminated shape. Mechanisms sprung to life, whirring, grinding, and a wall slid away to reveal an inset cut into the interior structure. Inside the sconce was a shape my hindbrain recognized as a machine meant for me. I reverently lifted the rectangular shape, longer than I was tall, out of its resting place and set it gently on the ground. The surface illuminated in shapes that matched my feet. I stepped upon the board, and it gently rose from the ground. There you go. That's the player finding their hoverboard. So that was the vibe I was going for there. So like those three chunks that I read you guys are like what we would refer to as the NUX, or the new user experience. And I was writing the emotion that I wanted to capture for each of those moments. Tony, you in the pyramid here? Yes.
Yep.
All right, sweet. So
I'm
yeah,
not gonna go to the bottom.
Okay, cool. No worries. Yeah, it's all good. So Tony showed you a way to get into this place, and now he's cruising around in here. So this is again, you see this repeated from Big Cube. He went inside Big Cube, and there was a sphere on the inside with some chutes and stuff that you can skate around in and try to get into or out of. That's the vibe here. So, imagine you're transitioning between this organic, natural landscape into more mechanical, harsh edges, really challenging skate park structure stuff. And that's what this game is. Lots of sci-fi notes and things like that. It's been really fun. Yeah, I like doing this stuff. This is the type of creativity that I enjoy the most. Let's see, where else was I read that thing. You guys kind of got an idea of the new user experience. The rest of the stuff is pretty big spoilery things. So I don't necessarily want to get into those. But yeah, Tony built a rail grinding system. We've got some slalom stuff. We've got gates and checkpoints.
I'm going to go to, we have a drone that I can drive around without being in VR. So I'm going to do that for a little bit.
Yeah.
And you can keep talking, but I think it does a better job of maybe showing off actually how big this is, because it would take me a very long time to skate around all of it.
Yeah, we could go for the rest of the stream and just skate around the perimeter of the map.
Fly up a little higher before I start here. Or yeah, maybe I'll just go around in the editor here, but you can kind of see like this is the cube. The pyramid that we're at is back over here where you can't see it. And it would take me a solid, like, I don't know, probably 10 minutes if I was going to skate from like here to the tower or something.
I think it's
like
more
that.
than that.
If
I
wasn't going to like crow fly it and go like straight over the mountains, and I was going to have to maybe like stick to more quote unquote rideable terrain, it would definitely take longer than that.
Yeah.
You would have to do something probably along these lines where you like went through here, and then you would have to get back over on this side of this ridge, so that eventually you could be in this valley right here. And if you take this valley, you could loop it like all the way back up through here. And even then, like, there's not really a way like straight up on top, but like the closest you could get would be like all the way back here. And the distance I just flew in the past 30 seconds was probably 10 to 15 kilometers. I'm moving 1,000 miles per hour right now.
Yeah, Tony's literally moving at like 1,000 miles per hour in this fly cam. So the scale is one of the most interesting parts.
If I fly up here, you can see this is 40 kilometers square. And it's
What's up,
real-world
Brightside?
terrain data. So in actual accurate 40 kilometers in real life and in the game. If I go into orthographic view here and I do this, 37 kilometers. Our new version is 40 exactly. But,
yep. Yeah, what's up, Queen Anne? I hope you got to, hear some of the things I was talking about a little bit ago. I shared a bunch of the narrative stuff. I actually sent the first paragraph of this to Brightside because he's putting a Hyperskate thing in Slice and Dice. And he was like, dude, what is this? And I was like, yo, just put it in the catalog. It'll be fine. It won't make any sense, but it'll be great. So yeah, I think it's cool shit. It's the stuff I love to do. But I was basically talking about like why you would write a story, even as a designer, whether or not the story is surfaced completely to the player in the game. Doesn't matter. It's important to tell the experience. So Queen Anne, if you're interested in that, go back and check out the VOD. Also, I'm so sorry, Woody Dev, Secret Lab. I just noticed that you followed. Thank you so much for the follow. That was probably about 8 minutes ago. Sorry about that. Writing novellas in Discord now. Yeah. Adder like knows this shit really well. He's a tech artist. I guess you could say tech designer too. Adder wears a ton of hats. He's been doing this for a while. So yeah, he's definitely an expert in a lot of this stuff. Really appreciate you chiming in. So yeah, Queen Anne, if that's something you're interested in, I don't necessarily want to reread it, but just because it's like several paragraphs of stuff, and I just read it all. So if you want to check it out and you're interested, definitely go through there and check it out. Mega Mocap, I posted links for you. That'll get you into all the things and tracking all the socials. If you want a key and you have a HMD that's equipped for PCVR on Steam, we can definitely send you a key and you can play some Hyperskate and play with us. Brightside says, afternoon. Thanks for that, Adder. Just woke up, so I'm gonna catch or check this thing out. Start off the day with some knowledge. Yes, dude. Good stuff.
Oh, nice, Adder. I was gonna tell you should go check out that lighting conversation. Looks like you saw that. That's great.
Queen Anne says, I think that's good advice. Writing and thinking up stuff that the player will never see directly is super important to my process. Yes. And I find that like it helps inform the team of the vision. I can write. I've been writing for a very long time. It's just something that I enjoyed like doing. And my best creative skill is just writing. So I use it a lot and I will write up like a whole story in not like a technical design, if that makes sense, where it's like, bulleted out list of features and like wireframes and stuff like that. Those are also important. But I tend to write like higher level vision things, creative director type shit. So that's why I'm in that role here. That's what I do. Writing is your forte too. That's amazing. Yeah, we talk about books with Anna Lareth, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that it's very important. I haven't met a lot of designers who like to creatively write or like write about their vision in that way that is fun and digestible. A lot of design documentation is really technical, super dry. It's boring, frankly, and most people on teams don't read it because it's not fun to read. So I try to find a way to make non-technical design documents that are more interesting to read, that deal in abstracts, that are inspiring, if that makes sense. But the other thing is also really important too. So it's all the things. This is a lot of what I do. I know that it can be confusing because I'm not showing you guys, hey, look, I'm in editor, like doing, like materials graphs and shit like that. That's not the type of thing that I do. Most of what I've done in my career in the games industry is like level and encounter design. So I'm very comfy doing that stuff, like placing assets in 3D space and, doing like design markup stuff with like a blueprint that's like, hey, this is a spawn point for the player. You pick that, you put it in a spot, adjust a script to say when this thing works and stuff like that. That's normally what I do. I think that shit's pretty boring. If you guys want to see it when we get to that stage, we can definitely like share more of that to show what that process is. Let's
I
see.
gotta ask you an unrelated car question real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
The dealership says they want to change out my engine coolant because it is turning a different color and it's $300. Should I have them do it?
I think you do that yourself, man.
Oh, is it like similar to an oil change?
Yeah, you take the cap off the top. You want it to be cold.
Yeah. Okay.
Open the drain cock at the bottom.
So that's going to cost me like $50 to do myself instead of $300 to have them do it.
100%, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to tell them not to do that then. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries, man. And I'm down to help you with that too. It shouldn't be too hard. We might have to pull some shit out to get to like the different drains and stuff, but it won't be that bad.
Yeah, I mean, generally the only reason I don't change my own oil is because I just don't like dealing with the fucking oil when you're done. But
yeah, antifreeze is the same thing. You're gonna have to like take it to O'Reilly's or some shit.
I mean, it's worth saving $250, so that's fine.
Yeah, Adder says different color ain't shit. Engine blocks rust. My coolant is rust color. Yeah, he's right.
I want my truck to stay nice, okay, but
yeah, he's right.
Yeah.
Oh, on your truck that'll be even easier because it's very high up. Yeah, that'll be way easier. And everything's probably like 5/6 of an inch or whatever the fuck it is.
American. Yep.
Yeah, everything's American. Yep. So it shouldn't be that bad.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Just got both my cars worked on the last 2 days. I've been asking Vince a bunch of questions. So
yeah, you good, bro.
I did. I'm just gonna pull Discord up here because I want to talk about what Brightside was asking us and then what Adder said about it. Just because I think this is interesting knowledge, and Adder actually clarified some of my understanding about some of these things. So Brightside,
real quick before you get into that, I wanted to catch Queen Anne's question. She says, have you ever run into the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe lore document? It's an 80-page document that was made for pitching purposes, and it's funny to me. It's the opposite of my process. No, I haven't. But if you have a link to it, that'd be really cool. I'd love to check that out. And then, and then
so was
Tony,
that written like in the 80s? I think that's when He-Man was a thing, right?
I would assume, yeah. Pitch documentation is really weird because it has to thread the needle between like, here's our business plan, here's what we're gonna make, and it has to be a little technical, but it also needs to be inspiring. I'm kind of ass at pitching, honestly. Like it's a skill that I need to keep working on. But yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. So Brightside was asking us initially about a lighting issue that he ran into where he rebuilt his lighting and everything changed. And I think he said it ended up being like a UV or something, but that will happen is that if something gets changed and you have a baked lighting scenario, there are times where you won't necessarily see that change until you've baked the lighting again. And if you don't bake your lighting constantly, then, stuff like that can just be hanging out and you don't even know. But regardless, we kind of just got into a discussion about static/baked lighting versus dynamic lighting and kind of just like some of the ways they work in the engine and the ways to think about when you should use them and when you shouldn't use them and stuff like that. And Adder had some really good responses. Basically, I had just kind of responded and said, like, if you're going to bake lighting, your lighting can't change. That's the entire reason it's called like static versus dynamic. And what's happening when you bake lighting is you're kind of saving what the lighting looks like, for lack of a better term, to the engine so that when it renders out that scene, it doesn't have to calculate the lighting. It doesn't have to do ray tracing or any sort of these other methods that are used to figure out lighting and shadows and stuff like that. And so that's the benefit of it, is it removes all of that overhead, and the trade-off is that you need to spend time doing the light bake. And if you've ever done a light bake, that can take a really long time, and if they fail, that's really frustrating. So on and so forth. And one of the reasons that I'm bringing this up too is because this scene that we've been flying around in right now, this is all static lighting. This is baked. That's how we've kind of been operating from day one, kind of because we're doing VR and it's a little more performant, but just also that's kind of the main reason mostly. But it's kind of a pain in the ass though, especially with this level that is 40 kilometers, like we were just talking about. The light bake generally will take like an hour on my PC and like 2.5 on Vince's sometimes, and that's with very little in this level if you just consider like the actual overall count of objects and stuff like that. So it would only get worse over time. Like you can see in my outliner, like not really that much stuff in this level comparatively for how big it is. So as we add more, the light bake takes forever. When we had all those trees in there that he was talking about for the trailer, I want to say it took 8 hours to do the light bake, and that was still a very small portion of the map. So it was going to become days if a computer could even do it without running out of memory. So kind of wanted to move away from that. You also can't do dynamic lighting in terms of like a day-night cycle if you have baked lighting. I think you probably technically can. Anything is possible, but you would have to like have every single material in your entire game have some sort of system that could connect into like this fake lighting so that it would know how to shade its material and stuff. And it'd probably be more complicated than just trying to figure out a way to make dynamic lighting perform it. But yeah, so I just wanted to talk about some of the stuff that Adder said. Like, if you want to do dynamic time of day, everything needs to be dynamic. I think that's one of the things that is worth understanding, because you can't bake light that is constantly changing. And if you want to get like a real day-night cycle, and you see it in video games where they're kind of like sped up so that an entire day is 5 minutes or something like that, you can sit there and you can just watch the sun move in the sky, or you can watch the shadows move because it's moving extremely quickly comparatively to real life. And so you would never be able to bake that lighting because the lighting scenario is literally changing every frame.
Tony, real quick, Turning Cog. What's up, Turning Cog? He says, why bake lighting? The whole selling point is dynamic lighting in UE5. I think the discussion was arising from Brightside not understanding why his lighting was weird. And then he realized, oh shit, do I need dynamic lighting or should I bake lighting? So I don't know that it's necessarily a perf question as much. There are perf gains, but the whole conversation Tony's talking about was whether Brightside was like, oh, do I do a dynamic day-night cycle, or do I do like, this is daytime phase of game, now you're in nighttime, and he can have a pre-baked map that makes his work easier because he's baked these maps, and he doesn't
Unreal
have
does
to,
have a thing in it called light maps, where you can have the same level that has two different light maps, and so you can bake a daytime light map and a nighttime light map, and then you could swap them out, and so you could have one level that looks two different ways. That's one way to do it, but now you're doing two different light bakes. Anytime you change literally anything, you're going to have to do both of those light bakes again. You're going to have to check both scenes, make sure they look good. Adder starts talking about how it's awesome, but it can be finicky and labor intensive, and that's kind of what I'm starting to talk about there. Every single change you make is going to kind of cause you to need to rebuild your lighting, and that can be annoying. One of the things I had kind of said in this conversation too, before Adder had chimed in too, is just I've seen Brightside's game, and I know that the scale of it isn't a 40-kilometer open world map like we're dealing with here. And it kind of just made me go, like, if you use static lighting, you're probably going to be able to get 500 FPS or something like that, because I know you have kind of a stylized art style too. It's not like hyper realistic or anything. It's not like ray traced. So I had just kind of made the comment, you could probably switch to dynamic lighting, and I bet you your perf would still be pretty good. Like, I don't know how like unoptimized your game might be, because that might be something that you would have to look at, but just knowing inherently what your game looks like and what the scale of it is and stuff like that, like, I don't think you're going to take a huge hit if you went to dynamic lighting, but you would just need to test it. And
Adder agrees with you. Adder,
I
he
was kind
agrees.
of, and there's ways you can test it too. Like, if you go to world settings in a level, you can do this thing called force no pre-computed lighting. And if I check that, it's now enabled. Build lighting once to propagate the change. So you do have to do one more build to free yourself from building light. And I think that build is actually technically just like deleting the light maps for you. But then this would make everything in your level operate as if it were dynamic, even if your lights are set up as static or, you know, whatever. So that's one good way to test it. There's also a project level checkbox that does this as well. So you can go into your project settings and do no static lighting. I think it's worded a little bit differently there, but it works the same way. And that might be a good way to test it, because if you don't like what you see, the worst case that you have to do is go back, uncheck this, and then rebuild your lighting again. And Tony, I say all of that knowing that you don't use source control. If you're using source control, you could just fuck everything up and then just roll it back when you're done. But
Tony, Brightside was asking how many lights are in Hyperskate. I'm pretty sure that we're just using global lighting from Ultra Dynamic Sky.
Right now, it's Ultra Dynamic Sky for a majority of what you're seeing here. It is in static mode and pretty much all of the light mobility. So this right here is what is making my lighting static. Here is the sun mobility is set to static, the skylight is set to static. We don't use the moon, so the moon doesn't affect us. But if I were to change this to movable, you can see lighting looks a little different. Just inherently, it's now slightly different. I don't have to do the light bake thing with the forced no pre-computed lighting thing when I do it like that, but otherwise I would have to. But you can also see now, since this is set to static, if I want to say change my time of day, just make the lighting like look a little different, we do this, eventually up here, it's going to say I need to rebuild lighting. I don't know if it's been like technically triggered yet, but that would happen. And then we'd have to rebuild the lighting and so on and so forth. So that's the downside to that. I'm going to quickly jump over to our new open world level that does have dynamic lighting. And I don't really know what the purpose of showing this off is right now. This is very much work in progress, but just to kind of give you an idea of kind of what this can look like. But this has a bunch of new fun challenges to it because this is a world partition level. So this is all broken up into chunks that can kind of stream in. And in the other level that we were showing you, that landscape is just a giant static mesh, for lack of a better comparison. And so when you're back here in these mountains in this valley and you can't see the giant cube and all that stuff over there, it's still loaded in and it runs pretty good. But when we get the trees and all the stuff that we started talking about, it was not good. So world partition is what we're hoping to be the solution to that. I'm still working on getting it looking good and performing correctly, but if we manage to pull this version off, this is complete dynamic lighting and should allow us to do a lot more cool stuff. So looking at the comments, let's see.
There's a bunch of stuff.
The lighting is something I think I have a basic understanding of, but I'm always nervous to get experimental with it because of how expensive lighting can end up being. So any and all info is greatly appreciated. I mean, bright side, in my opinion, just be conservative first and foremost. I think just in terms of like how many lights you're putting into your scene. And I know this is always kind of like a hard ask for some people because I know we're all busy and, you know, you could probably make the argument that the way that you have it set up right now is fine and you don't want to mess with it. But just there's a lot of YouTube videos out there like 5-10 minutes long that are just kind of like Unreal lighting basics that kind of just go through like the different types of lights and what all the settings in them do. And I think it would be helpful if you do, you know, kind of want to take a look at all of this stuff and try some new stuff out just to understand like what the difference in the engine and in terms of perf and stuff is going to be between using something like a point light or a spotlight or a skylight or a directional light. They all kind of have trade-offs. I know you, for example, really don't want to use a lot of point lights. They're usually the hardest on performance, followed, I think, closely by spotlights, and then like skylights and directional lights can be a little better, but they cover the entire scene. So there's trade-offs there. It can be helpful to understand that stuff and to kind of make some slightly more informed decisions just about like what you want your approach to be and how you want to handle things.
Also, I think Brightside, the real answer for whether or not you use dynamic lighting or static lighting with baked lights is a design consideration for you. How important is it that your player has a moving dynamic time of day type of a thing going on where like you can see the sun setting and that tells the player, oh shit, night's coming, I better get ready, stop serving pizza because like the, you know, marauders are going to show up, because I think you've got something like that, some mechanics like that. Or you could have it just do a thing. There's like a couple ways to do it. I know that you've got day and night, and you were talking about like, this is my day map, this is my night map, and you could have a timer tick down, however you want to do that. Schedule 1, for example, uses dynamic lighting stuff. So if you're watching the time of day change, you can see the sun move across the sky, the lighting changes.
But Schedule 1 is effectively what, cell shaded, I guess?
Yeah,
kind of. It's like very flat, like minimalist. Like all the materials have to be like one color basically, and like no specular normal mapping or anything like that. Like the rendering itself has to be pretty lightweight, and then they can do a little bit more fancy stuff with the lighting, which is cool.
So if you think about it, what I mean is, think of a like Elden Ring, or, you know, like Elden Ring's a bad example. Think of a, you know, one of the Dark Souls games. They don't have a day-night cycle. All the lighting is baked. It looks gorgeous, but you go into an area of the map that's like a new zone, and that has completely different lighting from another area of the map. And those are like baked lights. That's static lighting. It's not going to change. That, you know, makes the perf a little bit better. It is a lot more work beforehand, because then you have to go author each light and make sure your lighting is good, check every single instance of it, make sure your bakes are good, all that stuff that Adder was talking about. So there is more work involved. But again, it's a design consideration. In those Dark Souls games, they didn't need a day-night cycle because they didn't have this sort of like living world feel to it that they went with, you know, in Elden Ring, where like day-night changes. And
for what it's worth, like those games do, and this complicates this conversation a little bit, but you can have both. You can have a lot of baked lights, and then you can have a flashlight that's dynamic or something like that, and that's a possibility too. And you're going to take a little bit more of a perf hit on that dynamic light, but the Dark Souls games do that. If you have different spells active, like you have the blue magic swords floating above your head, like they cast blue light onto the walls and stuff around you, and but a majority of it is baked because it never changes.
So that's why, if you guys have seen the gaming discourse where people are like, why do games 10, 15 years old look as good or better than games now? It's because games now are moving to a dynamic lighting solution, pushing the boundaries of the technology, because they want this shit to look better. And they want to be like, look at all this crazy stuff we can do with day-night cycles. It's more immersive. It feels more real. You couldn't do that with static lighting. It just didn't. It became crazy and very difficult. So that's why things look the same or look better or worse. Like they're two different approaches entirely. So it's just the way it goes. And yeah, I think the static lighting, you know, process and pipeline and technology and how people built that stuff has decades more time of experience and wisdom put behind it. So people know how to make static lighting look really fucking good, and they know how to make it feel as though it's dynamic without it actually being dynamic. In the point that Tony was making, they use very specific instances of dynamic lighting or fake it, like Adder talks about with shadow casters and stuff like that. You can make lighting appear to be dynamic without it actually being dynamic. Adder knows all this stuff. This is not my forte. I'm not a lighting artist. It's a black box to me. I don't fully understand how people do it. I just see the end results, right?
Yeah, like in theory, you could have a game that was all baked and the materials themselves could have some variable in them that is controlled by the angle of the scene's directional light or something, and that causes the shading on the material to change, and then it would look dynamic, but it would technically be baked, and the performance would be better, but you would spend like 50 times the effort to set that system up over like just turning the dynamic lights on in Unreal and maybe just trying to keep an eye on your perf when necessary. So it's just this is starting to sound a lot like the Blueprint versus C++ conversation to me, where it's just kind of like both is good. Like,
yep. Yeah. There's so many different ways to skin this cat. Like what is so interesting about games, and you know, we've said it several times, is that video games have unique problems to solve. Every single game you're making has a new set of problems that no one's ever really solved before, and that usually is like the daunting task for especially smaller teams that don't have the wisdom or experience because they didn't make things on a big team. They're trying to be like, well, shit, what do I do here? And you know, that's another point of the Fractal Grove stream. We want to help you guys. So like, when I was learning how to make games, there was nowhere. You couldn't ask anyone anything. People were very tight-lipped about shit, especially in the industry. There's a lot of like gatekeeping of like, oh, well, if you want to learn how to do this and learn our secrets, you need to go make a game first. And it's like, well, where do I fucking start? And they're like, haha, that's the trick. I didn't know where to start either. You need to suffer too. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, it's just fucking bullshit. The whole industry would benefit from more people understanding how to do stuff, especially newer developers going out there, getting their hands dirty and figuring out what this weird ass thing they're trying to make is, because then you find some really interesting creative stuff. Then that becomes the bleeding edge tech. That's the new thing where people are like, whoa, how did you do this? I want to make it. And that's useful stuff that pushes the whole industry forward. Adder says, yep, dev time is a major consideration when deciding your route. Lumen is easy and quick to set up with minimal debugging, but expensive perf. Baked lighting is perf cheaper and more expensive and time consuming to implement well. Exactly. Yeah, that was a better way to describe it.
The important thing that with Lumen and Nanite that I've learned, and this might be more Nanite than Lumen, but I know I've heard this statement made a couple times, is that there is a baseline cost just to turning it on. So like if you're in this graph of your performance usage or something and you're at 10% before Nanite, and then you turn Nanite on, it might go to 40% just out of the gate, no matter what. And that's because Nanite is a little more expensive on your resources and your system and stuff. But beyond that, where in like your previous scenario, if you didn't turn nanite on, you added a ton of stuff to your scene, eventually it's going to get up and like become really bad performance. Like say you're up at like 80% resource usage or something. Nanite won't do that. You kind of like jump to that 40 initially as like your base cost, but then you could add like tons and tons of stuff to your scene, and it doesn't increase the resource usage really beyond that baseline, except for just a little bit. That's the way that I've always seen it explained. Adder, maybe you know a little better than I do on that one, but that's another way to like maybe think about some of these things. Like, I don't know if you're trying to make slice and dice like something that can run on every single person's computer, including like, you know, a Windows 7 machine from the mid 2000s. If that's the case, then you're probably going the right direction right now. But if you don't care about that so much, you know, you might be able to save yourself some headache and maybe make your visuals slightly more dynamic by just kind of turning the dynamic lights on and seeing how it goes.
Adder says nanite also majorly cuts down on LED generation costs, which is hugely expensive and dev heavy for large scale projects. Brightside, I don't know if you've gotten into LODs yet or any of that. That's another performance technique where you've got something really far away is going to use a lower quality, usually scaled using technology and software down, so that the human eye, when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, that looks like a tree. But if you get close to that LOD tree, it looks really bad, and it's incredibly simple. The way this shit works is as you get closer, it changes the thing into a higher definition version of what that is towards the like higher poly, better materials, you know, all that stuff when you get close enough. So those are things that you control as a developer. Yeah, that's great. And I mean, you could still use LODs in your map if you want. It's just,
you probably
it's up to
should.
you. Yeah,
But,
it's up to you. You'll gain a lot of performance out of it, which is useful.
And to be fair, Unreal is LODing things automatically for you to some extent, but it's worth engaging with the system and maybe dialing them in a little more than they come out of the box.
Turning Cock says nanite still doesn't act right with glass. So glass is a completely different problem. Transparency,
Nanite doesn't like transparency just in general.
Nothing does. We haven't figured that out as humans yet with these like visual simulations that we build. The physics involved in how you compute that shit is very, very complicated, and you start hitting shit which is overdraw, which means you're rendering stuff that doesn't necessarily matter way more than you need to, and the performance hits are massive. So that's why glass and transparency is very difficult to do, and that's one of those like visual effects, you know, black arts, one of the special techniques.
One of the reasons that the whole nanite foliage thing that they were touting in like the Witcher demo is becoming a thing, because traditionally when you're rendering leaves on a tree or something, you're basically just rendering like a square card that has the leaf on it, and then it's transparent where the leaf isn't. But nanite wants to render that whole square and doesn't really like the transparency part of it. And so the new technique is that you just make the leaf out of polys, and that would be insane before, because a tree would have like a trillion tries or something. But nanite is okay with that. And I was going to bring up these trees just to kind of show you kind of the more traditional LODing technique that we were using. Unreal has this thing called the imposter baker in it, and so we got these trees from this asset pack that I was just using to test. And I think it'll just do it here in the viewport as I back up, maybe not here, but I ran these things through this thing called the imposter baker, and what it does is it just makes them into like super low LOD so that they're actually look like this when they render. And this one is maybe broken. Let's see.
I also wanted to say, Queen Anne was asking, is that why big games don't have glass windows? Adder says, yep, glass is always avoided if possible. And that's 100% true. That's why you would often see a game like touting its glass, because this is another part of the disconnect between a gamer and a game dev. Game devs know how fucking hard that is to do, and why it's avoided, and why we don't do it, and why you don't touch it. Gamers don't, because in the real world, you're like, what do you mean? You just look through the glass. You just put some transparency on that shit. They don't understand the computational cost of doing that, and rendering all that shit is very challenging, and it's not worth it. It makes other areas of the game perform noticeably worse. For like, what, you have a window now? Like, that's a design problem. You can fix that without saying we must have windows. You must be able to see through them. Yeah, that's why like in Escape from Tarkov, they do have glass in some areas, but it's rare. And they do that on purpose because the glass is very poorly performant. It just always is in every instance.
Yeah, so I wanted to show you these imposters. I don't know why it's not working totally, but the idea is that this is the mesh that gets generated from this process here that you can see. And if I go to wireframe, you can see that it has, I want to say it's 8 tries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. So it's 8 tries. Supposedly that's like a magic number or something. I'm not sure why. But it applies a material to this that makes this little 8 try doodad look the same as that tree. Especially from like far away. It's kind of a very flat type thing, but that's a technique that you can use to make very low fidelity LODs that look pretty okay, and that's like built into the engine. If I go,
Tony, I want to talk about doors because doors are coming up in chat.
Okay. Yeah. All I was gonna say is there's this thing called the Imposter Baker. I probably have to turn the plugin on, but then that shows up in this engine folder in your outliner, and then you can run meshes through it and it will output them in that little 8 try LOD thing.
So bright side, doors and elevators are very hard to do because of the logic involved. Consider what an open door looks like in code and what a closed door looks like in code. How do you track which door was opened, which door was closed?
Like, not to mention like getting into like,
just think about that.
Maybe your character is going to grab the knob when they walk up to it and like push it open, or like pull it closed behind them or something. Like imagine
which direction does a door open? What is the state of a door?
Is the door allowed to open?
Yes. Yeah. All of that shit is very difficult from a logic perspective. Just figuring out how to do it in a way that is like scalable. And that's why doors are largely avoided in games in general.
And then you got to keep it synced across the network and multiplayer. And
elevators are a whole other thing. If it's literally an elevator, that's very difficult to do because you have physics components to it. You need to know the up and down state. You need to know the motion of the elevator. You need to know the player character position relative to the elevator. If there's AI that could be around the elevator, that creates entirely different sets of problems. The majority of elevators are actually loading transitions. And what that means is there's markups. If you see these, rectangles in the game that are just wireframes, there's markup that says this begins a loading zone and this is going to load the next section of the map, and it will keep those things, in memory so that the player can smoothly transition between those without like, oh, you hit a loading zone and now you get a progress bar and you have to wait and that takes you out of the game. So most elevators are literally just loading zones. And instead of seeing a progress bar go up, you have some animation and stuff that's kind of like playing in the background. Mass Effect, I think, was famous for this because they used elevators as loading screens everywhere. Adder wrote, I think Apex, if they do have windows, they'll break them and put glass shards on the ground near the window frame. There are ways to make glass work decent enough, but you have to be smart about placement as to not visually layer them over other geometry that may conflict with how glass renders. So like the worst is glass looking at glass looking at glass. If there's like multiple windows you can see through, it becomes computationally almost impossible. All of your resources are being used just for that one fucking shot. And there's no reason to do that.
It's funny that you're talking about this now, though, because I'm thinking about like my streamer cube thing on the coin pusher. And there's areas in there where you're probably looking through 5 different pieces of glass, but it's substrate glass. So I think that maybe that makes it work different, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, glass technology is a thing the industry is always chasing because they want to put glass in stuff. Because
I'm going to get it pulled up just so we can look at it. But
yeah.
Bright side, I found the Imposter Baker. They moved it around a little bit in the recent versions, it looks like. But you go to scripted asset actions after right-clicking on a static mesh. Then you got Imposter Baker here. You got to make sure you turn this on in the plugins. It looked like it might have been on by default, but if not, just know that it's spelled with an O at the end. That was throwing me off. But if I do this launch imposter editor, it's going to bring up this thing here in the engine where I am able to generate a very low fidelity LOD of this thing. Does not want to dock in the tabs. Okay.
Adder also said glass on glass is a crime in games. Specific example being a building window looking through vehicle windows because the vehicle has heavy internal ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion and transparency are not compatible. Honestly, from what I've seen, if like a junior artist makes some shit like that, it's like disciplinary, because that's like 101. That's shit you should know as like an artist. Do not do this.
The closest like glass thing that we were able to get that looked okay in VR is uses a lot of dithering instead of like an actual transparent material. It's like an opaque material that's dithered so that it just, you can see through it in a lot of spaces. And I guess that I'm not smart enough at graphics to explain why that's better, but it does hit the perf a little less. It still hits the perf a little too hard for us to use it in a lot of cases, but
it's not trying to match light physics to reality. That's why. It's just doing a smoke and mirrors thing. And that's the important takeaway for you guys, is that any of these things where you see glass and whatnot is all fake. It doesn't function like the real world in any way. That's why you'll often see it a little bit janky and you're like, huh, well, it looked good enough. I don't care. That's the point. You have to go for like, it looks good enough, the player doesn't care, and they stay immersed in the game, because that's the important piece. You're trying to convince them that this fake thing you've created is worth spending time in and being interested in. And anytime you do something to pull them out of that, that's when the suspension of disbelief breaks, and that becomes less fun. They're reminded they're playing a game, and they're immediately like, well, I don't really want to do this anymore. If you think about watching a movie or watching a TV show, when they break the fourth wall type of a thing, that's why it's like a cardinal sin, is because you're reminding the audience that they're not in the story. They're literally in a room choosing to look at this thing, and that makes people not enjoy stuff. It's better when you're like, oh yeah, this is all real, and I believe it's real, and I'm having a great time because it's real. It's not real. I don't know why our brains work that way, but they do.
Let me see it.
Tony, there was conversations about substrate glass. Adder was saying he doesn't know of any project utilizing substrate at scale, and they ditched it.
Yep. No, I agree. It's just, I happened to find that recently when I try to find like a good glass material, like tutorial or something online, a lot of them use substrate, and there's some like really nice looking substrate glass. This is kind of the scene that I'm talking about here, where like there's definitely times where like you're looking through an outer piece of glass here, there's an inner piece of glass there, there's another one here, there's one up here, there's some down here. This runs really good for the most part. It's obviously a pretty small scene that doesn't have too much going on in it, but I do remember back in the day, especially like on UE4, if you tried something like this, it would just, I wouldn't even be able to do this in the scene. It wouldn't work.
I personally, I just want to say I love having conversations like this with you guys, because this is like,
I've been mentally kind of been like, I need to thank Brightside for bringing this up, because this has been really good, and I like talking about this stuff with you guys.
Stuff that no one fucking talks about in like a human way. They always, you know, no offense, Adder, but they use a lot of jargon that like the layman indie dev who's just making a passion project doesn't fucking understand. And they just, it's like, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand what any of these terms mean. And I think it's fair to say that, and you don't want to like look stupid and ask, I don't know what this means. My personal take on that, if you feel like you're asking a question that you might think is a stupid question, you should ask anyway. And if a person reacts negatively to you for not understanding something that you haven't learned yet, that's on them. Like, that's fucked up. You should never like look down on people for trying to understand something that they don't know. So I think it's always appropriate to ask any question, even if you're like, oh, the answer is obvious. It's like, well, that doesn't mean they're stupid. They might know it, but they want some clarifying information that helps them reach a conclusion that makes sense. Yeah, a question not asked is the only stupid question. Yeah, don't be afraid. And also don't shame people for not knowing shit. Like, that's silly. It's juvenile behavior.
Like making fun of fat people for going to the gym.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you shouldn't do that. That person is
no
there to try.
They're doing the work
anymore, and you're gonna make them feel bad about it.
Yeah, no, fuck that. Hashtag blame Brightside. No, dude, no.
Like I said, like, this is the type of shit we want to talk about on the stream, and it's hard to force a lot of the time, and that is why we always, you know, very vigorously encourage you guys to like ask questions and like come to us if you want help, or you want to talk, or you just, you know, you want to bounce some ideas off us or something. Like, there's a, you know, slightly selfish reason for it, is because we want to have stuff to talk about on the stream, and I think it's really fun, and I want to help you guys, and I want insight into what you're doing, and Adder helps me a lot. I want to kind of like give that back, and just all of that. So.
It's also generally better than us like fishing for topics of conversation. When we have an organic conversation like this, where you guys like are genuinely interested and you have questions, it's so much better for us. Because otherwise we're like, I guess we could talk about this today. Hopefully people think it's interesting. Yeah. So yeah, we depend on you guys to make the stream like entertaining and informative and all of that. Otherwise we're trying to like collate topics and come up with stuff to discuss. But yeah, it's very cool.
Call me, I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries, bro. Yeah, it's really cool. So I'll talk about the rail stuff while Tony's away. Tony slapped this shit together. This is something that we were talking about trying to figure out. And then he just like posted a video in our business Discord of like, hey, check this out. And I was like, oh shit. So like finding ways to do tricks in Hyperskate has been really important to us. And we knew that riding a rail in some form is a big component to that. So getting just a working version, even in an early prototype, was super important. Excuse me, super important to the health of the project and moving towards the vision for what we want to deliver and what we want to make. Chat was the true streamer all along. Yeah, exactly. You guys do create the content. Yeah, you guys are wonderful. I think I've told you guys before, but like starting the stream thing, like I don't go like, I love streaming. This is so fun. Look at all this attention I have. I don't fucking like that at all. It's not, it's very draining. And any of you guys who stream understand that, because you got to like stay on and like have high energy and be entertaining and communicate with people. And like your focus is split across a billion things. So that being said, one of my favorite things that I didn't expect was getting to meet all of you awesome people and have these conversations. And like, it's fulfilling in a very human way. And I just didn't expect that to happen. And it's cool because like you go from no community to a small community to a larger community. I know there's going to be a time when our chat is just lots of bullshit all the time. It'll be very difficult to engage with each of you individually. So I appreciate that we're at the point now, and I'm like really just enjoying this moment of our stream and like what we're doing out here on socials, because it's so small that I get to talk to each of you guys individually and like answer your questions and we can have a discourse. So I'm thankful for that. And I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for it. Yeah, just being here is a ton of support. So we really appreciate that. Queen Anne says, I'm still trying to figure out lighting in a 2D space. I think it's less of a performance risk there, but there's still a lot to it. Yeah, honestly, Queen Anne, I would almost say that 2D lighting is probably harder because everything is fake there. And you're really trying to execute on like a specific artistic vision and you want it to look a certain way. So like picking a lighting model is, very art director relevant and all of that. I think that's probably where most of your conversations are going to be. And if you're the art director, which I don't think you are, you said you got an art director recently, that's really good. And you guys can have conversations about that. You'll probably be in some tension. Art director wants specific look. Technology, your tech stack owner will be like, well, we can do this, but we can't do that. And so there's going to be a lot of back and forth. And then creative director, which I think is where you are, you're going to be the person who will have to make the call that will compromise and make both sides unhappy, but at least you'll get closer to what you're trying to make, LFQ says, the few times I streamed while gaming, I've always been absolutely drained of energy after like 2 hours. That's literally why we do 2-hour streams. Because
if you guys remember those days I would do like 8 hours of, making the zombies or something. It's hard to describe the way that I would feel after those. It's not the same as like a long day of work or like doing physical activity, but you just feel so drained in like this very specific way. It's very weird.
The social batteries, regardless of your like level of extroversion, are just empty. Completely
and I'll sit
empty.
on Discord with Vince for like 12 hours and do exactly the same thing, but it does not feel the same afterwards. So
Queen Anne says, dang, that at least explains why I'm struggling with it. Yeah, you're dealing with very difficult problems to solve.
I feel like it's just because you're like constantly like just in the back of your mind, you're thinking about the fact that like people are watching you and you're just kind of even if you're not the type of person who's really that worried about it, I think you are just constantly checking yourself and making sure you're, you know,
you want to be
showing
real, but
yourself in
not
a
say
way-
crazy
yeah.
shit that gets you in trouble. Yeah, I struggle with that a lot. There's a lot of things I don't say on stream that I would say in private that like would get me in a lot of trouble. And it's just because people don't know me. And if I get taken out of context, it's bad. I've already been taken out of context by multiple people with way bigger audiences than us. And like, it feels bad. I understand why people go like, no, it's taken out of context. That's not what I said. That's not what I meant. Listen to the whole fucking thing and you'll hear what I mean. But specifically, Tony Queen Anne was talking about lighting a 2D game.
Mhm.
And I was explaining like that's a very difficult task. Like
Oh, man,
3D
yeah.
is easier because it's not an art style. It's based on reality. And there's a lot of software that just kind of fills in the gaps for you. But
Even if
lighting
you were
2D,
doing like dynamic 2D, like
yeah.
oh my god, 2.5D would be easier just because you
Yes.
would have like a 3D model to do the lighting for you, because otherwise the entire thing would just be like hand drawn basically. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I see. Adder said this is a part of why 2.5D
Exactly.
has become more popular. There you go.
Yeah, and then
Thanks, everybody.
turning cog coming from like a fine arts perspective, very, very real. Whenever I help people draw, choosing the direction of the light and where it comes from is the hardest part for them. Yes, it's really difficult. Lighting and perspective and proportion are like the 3 cornerstones of good illustration. These are all things that I learned at art school. So like it matters so fucking much. Lighting and composition go so far, really, really far, and whether or not your image is good. What's up, anime? Welcome, brother. Joman. The Joman has entered chat. This is a Night Rain inside joke. We got an Omen boss and anime called it the Joman, which we appreciated.
For whatever reason, it was very funny in the moment.
I was confused. It could have been my reaction because I was like, what the fuck is Joman? And everyone was like, Omen, but with Joe in front. And I was like, oh, yeah. Oh, thank you, Adder.
Anime, you need to buy the Wilder helmet. I think
yes, dude.
You need that.
Yeah, show that to Anime. He's gonna be
I
like,
put it in the chat, so hopefully he saw it. But of anybody, he's the one who needs that.
Yeah, Anime deeply identifies with Wilder. Yep. Yeah, my art teachers, like, they taught me a lot of shit that I didn't realize mattered. Adder, I remember I was doing a life drawing class and I was like woefully behind on some of my assignments because I had to work the whole time I was in art school. And, you know, whatever excuses you want to throw out there, I should have drawn more. But in order to like get right for that class, my teacher was like, you need to draw 150 hands. And I was like, what? And he goes, you have a week to do it. And I was like, you're fucking kidding me, Wes. And he goes, no, dude. Seriously, draw 150 hands. By the end of it, my hand drawings were fucking solid, dude. They were really good.
Like one of the hardest things to draw, isn't it?
Yep. And it's because he wanted me to prove that the stuff that I was learning in life drawing was actually shit that I understood. And he was like, talk to me if you're struggling. Let's figure it out. You know, I'll help you get to the good spot. He's like, but I have full confidence you can do this. I just need you to show that you're going to do work. And I was like, all right. And I did it. And I was fine. And I learned a lot. It was great. I want to say that same class, we like went to the zoo and like sketched animals and shit. The animal sketches were awful. I fucking hated mine, but I don't know. Drawing is hard. I've been drawing since I was like 8 years old, and I'm not, I still like, sometimes I draw stuff and I'm like, this is complete ass. And then other times I draw stuff and I'm like, hey, this worked out really well. I was in the right flow state. I had the right vision, right reference material. Everything was great. And the drawing was really easy for me to do. I don't know. It's funky. There's a reason why I'm not a commercial artist, and that's how I make my living. There are so many people who are way better at it than I am, and that I assume and kind of believe that I ever will be. Yes, Tony in the teleporter. I love it. So here's some more of the shit that we're working on with Hyperskate. Lots of really interesting technology. I don't want to explain how this will be used in the game, but imagine, based on the top of the stream, what I was talking about and how this game will play, how some of these things could be used. So yeah, I'll let you guys fill in the blanks there, because I could explain, and I'm like itching to explain, but it's huge spoiler material, so I don't want to. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about it. But suffice it to say, based on the narrative that, you know, I read you guys, this shit fits. Oh no, connecting to chat. Hold on, I'm refreshing my stream so I can read what you guys said. Why do you do this, connecting to chat? Oh, I've got another one over here. I can read it from here. Let's see. Yes, I went to the Art Institute of Colorado, bro. The for-profit college. So one of my favorite stories about when I knew this was a waste of my time and money was my intro to 3D modeling class. I ended up getting like a C in that because I just didn't fucking understand any of the stuff. And I was like, dude, this teacher is ass. I want to retake this class. I went and talked to my advisor, and the advisor goes, well, you got a C+, so you can't retake the class. And I was like, not even electively? What the fuck are you talking about? He goes, no, it's checked off on your like degree program. You can't take the class again. And I was like, what? I'm paying for this. Let me pay for the class again with a different teacher. And they were very firm. They were like, absolutely not. You can't do it. And I was like, this is problematic. Turning Cog says, I miss life drawing sometimes, but then I sit down with a pen and pad and get flashbacks to that kind of pressure at school and can't enjoy it. Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but I don't know. I like pressure. It works well for me. I don't know why. Ours is 2D with a lot of parallax layers. I discovered normal maps, light maps made a huge difference. Character has a metal collar on them, so having that react to light differently really elevates it. That's the right creative vision, Queen Anne. If you're like, this is how you need to have these conversations with your art director, right? Say like, I really care about how this looks. How do we execute on that? And like, what do we do? How do we continue to light our 2D stuff in this way?
So how does lighting work in that scenario? Like, is it
lots of sprite sheets?
Yeah, so is it just based on like the appearance of everything? You're kind of like effectively just creating the illusion of lighting. But you mentioned you have normal maps and stuff like that, which would make me think that there is a light source that would be doing something. But if it's a 2D game, it hurts my brain trying to figure out like where the light exists, because it would have to exist in like that 2D space around the character. It can't be like within the 3D space in front of or behind them. So I don't know. Interesting.
Yep. It's all like, it's just a lot of illustration. And it's, if you're doing lighting changes in a, you know, pixel art flat game, you need a ton of sprite sheets. You need like, this is afternoon lighting on this character. This is nighttime lighting. This is early morning. You got to like swap all those out in code and stuff like that. It's a lot of work. Adder says, I did 1 year of Art Institute Orange County, met dope people, realized I could sneak into another local college's lectures for free, and dropped out because I was only there for knowledge rather than a piece of paper. I dropped out of my third year, and that was my same realization. I was like, I'm losing money. I'm going into a lot of fucking debt for this degree. And that was when I started my IT networking career. I got out of, like, I was working in restaurants in the kitchen and shit and making like $8 an hour. There was a night where I had a really rough night in the kitchen, and I realized that the front of the house staff made like $60 each in tips, and I made like $30 for the night because the kitchen didn't get tipped out. And I was like, the fuck am I doing? I just spent so much time here for something that isn't going to matter, just so I could like buy, you know, pay some bills, right? Like it was stupid. So I went and got a better job, dropped out, you know, did a whole IT networking career for about 7 years. And then that got me a really good job towards the end of it. The last 4 years, I had a really solid job at a telecom. And that got me the ability to take vacations and stuff. And I went on vacation to PAX, met a bunch of people at PAX. And that got me into making video games. And while I was working that day job, I would come home at night, you know, with like a 6-pack and work on the first game, Astro Golf, doing level designs until like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I would do that like every day. So I'd put in like 6 to 8 hours after a 10-hour shift. And I did that for probably like 6 months. Luckily, my wife, who was, I think, just my girlfriend at the time, we weren't even engaged, she was totally cool with it. She was like, obviously it was difficult, but she was supportive, and she was like, yeah, I understand that you want to do this. And, you know, shouts to Sparkle Loser for being massively supportive in all my crazy ideas and what I want to do with my life. She's the rock that holds this house together, y'all. With 2.5D, do you mean Cult of the Lamb? Yeah, interesting.
I said more like Metroid Dread, and that Cult of the Lamb is probably isometric technically. I don't know if it's like
it's still like 2.5D,
but...
yeah, because they have like lighting on the animated whatever the fuck drawings they have.
But I think it's all sprites. Like, I don't know if there's actually any 3D graphics. I'm not sure. Let's see.
It might be like a combination of cards and stuff.
I guess it does have some 3D, like, kind of like Animal Crossing. You know, Animal Crossing's like on a big tube. I think it's like that, but everything's like billboards. Yeah, so it probably is technically a 3D game.
Yeah, as I'm looking at just Google image search screenshots, it looks as though there are shadows being cast by these.
I see what you mean. Yeah, it's like 2D sprites on a 3D environment. Okay. That's not 2.5D though. I don't even know what that is. That's just 3D, isn't it?
I think it's 2.5D because the characters are flat. The environment art is flat. The environment itself, like the ground surface, does appear to have some dimension to it that, more than 2 dimensions.
But if you were doing like weird Metroid Dread or something, it's like it's full 3D. The only thing 2D about it is just the movement and the design.
Yeah, the camera is fixed in one spot. Yeah.
This is what we do. We just argue about semantics about video games all day.
Yeah, totally. Adder was responding to you, Tony, when you said, I tell everyone that unless they want to be doctor, lawyer, or engineer to go to trade school. And Adder said, facts. If you're self-disciplined enough in trade without a need for a degree, piece together your own schooling with courses with various reputable industry pros. Noman is a great example. Yeah, absolutely.
And I went to a 4-year college. I have an art degree technically from CU Boulder, and I went back to trade school. It was like a code boot camp, but my entire career is based off the trade school. It has nothing to do with me going to college. It kind of felt like a waste of money.
Yep. My entire game design career is based off the same shit. I did a lot of independent study, read books, learned from people.
I remind myself that we're all a sum of our experiences in life, and that I wouldn't be in the same place now if I hadn't gone to college. But it's not something that I really draw from in my day-to-day almost ever. So
I also think that, game designer is like a coveted position, and everyone wants to be a game designer because they think it's just you're the idea guy and you come up with all the stuff, and that's the coolest job, the most glamorous. You're like an auteur. Game design programs, in my experience, especially because I went to the Art Institute, were predatory. It was like you didn't learn anything that made you a better game designer. You learned a smattering of skills that you could sort of apply to get a job in the industry and then try to work your way into a game design position. There are some exceptions. I worked with a really cool guy at Bungie who had a game design degree from like SMU Guildhall, and that sounded like a really good program. There's also DigiPen. I think the biggest reason you go to DigiPen is because of the industry connections in the Pacific Northwest. There's like DigiPen's literally on the Nintendo campus. So you're immediately networking there. And I want to say, not trying to throw shade. I didn't go to DigiPen. I wanted to go to DigiPen when I was a kid, financially prohibitive. I just couldn't do it. I didn't have, a family support structure that would allow me to get in there. And it's a private institution, very expensive and difficult to get into. But it almost seems to me like you're paying for the exclusivity of that social network and like getting, plugged into the industry so that you can get that entry level job and just stay in games forever. Right. So I went a really weird route and built my network through conventions, going to PAX and meeting people and just making a connection with the right people that were really cool and helpful and had the same mentality that we have. They wanted to share knowledge and help other people come up. They appreciated my passion for video games. And so they, coached me a lot along the way and helped me like, hey, I know this person, you should talk to them. It might be a good open door for you to get into this studio or to, talk about a project they're working on. That happened a lot. And it's, that's why they say it's more about who you know than what you know. Yeah. Without the rest of the band, you're just a dude. Important and closer to the audience, but not the whole picture. I mean, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it is like being a front man in a band. Yeah, and people think that that's like the cool part of the job, you know, is like you're the guy, and it's like there's a lot of weight on your shoulders when you're the guy, and people don't talk about that. But like, if you are making, you know, I've talked about it on stream. If you're a creative, you know, lead creative director, and you're in that position and you're holding the vision for the game, and you don't have a good vision, but you just kind of fell into that position. I've seen a lot of creative directors like not have a job anymore because they just fumbled shit so badly. And it's like, I don't know how they even got this position in the first place. They were like a really skilled VFX artist or like a concept artist. And, you know, someone was like, well, I like the things that this person's saying, so I'm going to elevate them to that position. I mean, I actually got this was, I'll just tell you guys, why not? This is a little bit of like my personal history, but I was working at a place. Yeah, I won't say where. I was working at a place where I was doing a thing that was cool and important, and I really liked the thing I was working on. And I had a design leadership person come to me and have like a private meeting, and they were like, hey, I want you to potentially do creative direction on this next thing that we're thinking about doing. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. I'm super flattered. That sounds great. And they were like, there's a catch. And I was like, what's the catch? And they're like, you have to abandon what you're currently working on so that we can groom you in this position and get you in, you know, ready for this role. And I was like, respectfully, if I leave this project right now, it will fall apart entirely. And I don't want to do that. And they were like, you're making a mistake. And I was like, I mean, if you really truly believe in it, I'd love to have this conversation with you later. And the person was like, nah, there won't be a conversation later. And I was like, honestly, I kind of feel like I dodged a bullet there, because I don't want to be working with someone who's going to give me an ultimatum like that and be like, abandon your creative vision to guide a bigger creative vision that you may not even be in control of. So I was like, nah, fuck that. So I don't know. It felt weird. I do kind of think about it, and I'm like, where would I be if I had accepted that offer, you know, now? And it would probably not be in the happiest place. I love what I'm doing now. I really like this partnership that we've got here with Fractal Grove, and, you know, expanding the network and the reach and meeting new people. This is very fulfilling to me. So I'm happy doing what we're doing. We gotta find the way to make it so that I can pay bills. That's the thing. And thankfully, because of you guys in chat, like, the business isn't losing us money. Technically we're profitable. It's just very small margins, but, you know, we're covering operation costs and building up a fund so that we can pay people to do other things and contribute to our games and our projects. So yeah, we're getting there. Adder, you're taking off. Take it easy, brother.
Yeah, thanks for everything, Adder. I think, you know, we'll be wrapping up here in a minute too. Brightside, if you ever want to have us take a closer look at your lighting, or you have more questions or anything, like, I'd be really happy to do that. I know I'm not super great about catching your streams when they're live, but legitimately, you could just like hit me up on Discord and be like, yo, I'm going to stream some game dev stuff right now. If you come through and take a look, and I'll do that. I'll jump on a private call with you, you know, whatever you want. I'd be happy to help. So
Anime, was that emote you posted? Is that Misato? Yeah, you guys are laughing that I said the word groom. It wasn't like the gross connotation groom, so chill out, guys. It wasn't like that. It was more like we want you to be successful in this position and understand how to like play ball with the bigger team and the leadership people, because that's difficult and a different set of challenges. And yeah, like, I get it. Joker Misato, hell yeah. So yeah, it's weird. It's weird to think about, because like, I'm in a creative director position now, but it's at a company that I co-founded. So like, you know, I kind of gave myself the job. I guess Tony gave me the job too, because, you know, we're even partners. Like, we can't make any decisions without, you know, full alignment on anything. So I would agree that being pressured like that is shitty. Knowing your position is vital to a project and then just abandoning it isn't a decision everyone should make, right? They should have understood that. Yeah, and as I think about it in retrospect, Queen Anne, it could have been an attempt to scuttle my project in that there was nothing actually there for me of any substance. I cared more about what I was making. I've told you guys this a lot. Like, I do this because I genuinely like to make games. There's a really compelling satisfaction you get from making some fake shit that someone cares about. And that hit me really hard, probably in like 2017, 2018, working at Bungie on Destiny. I saw how people reacted to the things I made, and I was like, I'm getting real emotions from these human beings out on the internet. And instead of talking about like me or the studio, they were talking about the experience and what it made them feel about life and like the people they interact with. And like, that's fucking cool. So that's why I do this shit. That's what I love about it. Let's see. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. I'm finally getting to the point where a few of the things like lighting and optimization are coming up, not just little gameplay bugs. Yeah, dude, I think that's probably the sloggiest part of making a game, Brightside, is when you get into that, because it's not fun, but it really matters at the end of the day. So even if you just want
to start worrying about now instead of like at the finish line, and you're like, oh, I need to go back and like fundamentally change how we did this thing because it doesn't work. And yeah. So
yeah,
it's just something we've tried pretty hard to just like keep it in mind at all times, especially because of VR. Like if you let it get away from you in VR, you're just maybe never going to get it back. So yeah, it's the biggest fight that we're fighting right now. And we talked about, how we're trying to figure out the world partition stuff and the dynamic for static lighting stuff. And just all of that is like a majority of what I've been doing all day, every day lately. So again, if you want me to take a look, I'd be happy to do it. And yeah. Please keep the questions like that coming too. Again, it spurs really good discussion on the stream, and I'm always happy to kind of do what we did and dive into a topic and kind of show some stuff. So yeah.
Turning Cog was saying, shouldn't they respect you finishing the project? If they set the precedent to bounce on a project, how do they know you won't do that to them? They open the door to that behavior. It's like finding you got cheated on by your partner. Can't be surprised when you find another gig partway through. Yeah. So that's why I think. Turning Cog, that it was probably like a political maneuver to see how I would react to like a carrot, being dangled in front of me. And I'm not about that shit. I just want to make good game. I don't want to fucking get into interpersonal politics and who's a, big dick in some fucking meeting because they're self-important and blah, whatever. I don't fucking care. I just want to make good shit, man. That's obviously this attitude doesn't serve me well in a big corporate environment, because I will say that shit and then they'll be like, wow, dude, you got a fucking shitty attitude. Why don't you want to play ball? And I'm like, why do you guys not fucking care about making a good game first? Like, that's what you should care about. Let's make something cool. Let's just fucking care about that instead of like who's friends with an NFL player or fucking, who knows what B-list celebrity. Who gives a fuck, man? It doesn't matter. And, this is why you guys have heard me talk so much shit about like industry leaders and, the higher up people at bigger studios. It's because they care about that stuff. And it's so fucking stupid. Queen Anne says, yeah, I've had some people tell me that my writing has changed their life somehow. It's really meaningful. And I'm hoping to get that feeling from making games. Dude, I can relate so much. And it's like, it's such a weird feeling because you're like, but I just did these things. Like, how do you feel that way? And then you overanalyze your own art and like what you create. And you're just like, oh, I'm always chasing this greatness again. Like, how do I get there? It's a never ending, it's almost like torture, right? Brightside says, so much of that stuff 90% of people never think about while playing a game. It's what we spend all of our time fixing. Yeah, dude. And all those little details matter. They really, really do. So I know it's tough, but yeah, Brightside, you're not alone, man. Seriously, I know that, sometimes you might feel like you want to solve it on your own and like you feel reluctant, but like the door's open, bro. Like, come on through. I'm happy to talk to you about game design shit, and like, not in terms of like, well, Brightside, here's what you should do because I'm the expert and like blah, blah. I'm not going to tell you what to do. The better thing that I like to do when trying to give people advice on design stuff is figure out what the fuck you're trying to make first. And then based on what your vision is, help kind of like steer you in that direction so you can hit those things based on my opinion and my wisdom. So like, and when I say wisdom, it's not to be self-aggrandizing. It's more like, I mean, by definition, wisdom is experience, knowledge gained over experience, right? Like living longer and having done these things, I've learned some things that I couldn't have learned otherwise. So that's what I'm trying to say is like, if you ever just want to be like, bro, I don't know how I'm going to do day night cycle, or I don't know what the upgrades catalog is going to look like, what the game loop is, that's shit that I'm really good at. So if you want to just chat about that stuff, I'm more than happy. Let me know.
Oh, or he'll ask you a bunch of questions that will like make you defend your position in a way that is usually like a good idea. If you can't, I always say, like, if you can't answer those questions, then you need to go back to the drawing board for a little bit. So
yeah, totally. Cool. Well, I think we're sort of at the end here. Tony, you got any parting thoughts or anything?
No, not right now. I think you guys are getting a good look at it. Like, we're kind of coming out of a period of, not that we haven't been working on it, but it's like we changed the player controller out quite a bit. We've been working on a lot of stuff that doesn't appear to move the needle forward from the outside. And I think we're starting to finally get out of that now that the character thing is done. We're adding new stuff like the rails and kind of trying to figure things out. So, hopefully it looks a lot different from what you saw today here soon.
LFQ said, it probably tying into what I was saying about like talking to someone and whatnot, a sparring partner is just as important to learn from, not just the teacher. Yeah, that's totally right. And Tony and I, like, admittedly have had some heated arguments about things, but that's like healthy. It's a part of it. Like Brightside said, Mythic Quest, I'm like Ian and Tony's like Poppy in that, like, we can clash sometimes, but I like say ridiculous shit like Blood Ocean, and Tony's like, I don't even know what the fuck that means, dude. And I'm like, neither do I. Let's figure it the fuck out. And then like, we get there and Tony comes up with some like crazy ass good idea. And I'm like, dude, let's fucking do that. That's perfect. But just me saying dumb shit like that gets him to a spot, where he's like really thinking about it deeply. And then he'll challenge something that I said. And I'm like, well, maybe I didn't think this through as well. Well, here's what I'm going for. How do we get there? Because I obviously don't know. Turning Cock says, from the jump of me learning the engine, I found a community with Adder and like 6 other dudes. They saved me a lot of headache by sharing their wisdom. Yes.
Yeah. Adder's been so helpful. I know he left, but he's really
nice.
We
love Adder.
It lets me, bounce ideas and questions off him whenever I have them. And he's, really informed my approach and thinking and the way we're trying to do stuff. So
I really hope I like Mortal Shell too. That's all I'm saying. I really do. Yeah. It looks very cool. I'm very excited for it. So Mortal Shell 2 is the game that Adder's been working on. If you guys want to check it out, they premiered their trailer at Summer Games Fest. They were #1 out the gate. Very cool. Brightside is working on Turning Cog. I'm happy to shout you out too. Queen Anne, I'm sorry I can't remember the name of your game. I know you posted it in Discord. It's gone right now. So I please talk about your work. You guys are all awesome game devs. We love having you in the community. Let's see. Sorry, Turning Cog said, I'm going to get some of the advice they gave me, but at least I have a better idea of the pitfalls I would encounter. Yeah, exactly, man. It's good to make your own way.
That's important. Like, as long as you know why the decision you're making might go against general advice, like, you can still make that decision, but you should have a reason for doing it, and you should be able to defend it when somebody asks you about it. That's all.
Mega Mocap said, oh, wow, nice. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but hell yeah. Nice change of pace with the Hyperskate focused dev stream. Yeah. Brightside, I don't know if you were here for it, but I was talking about it. Like, I was just really scared to share a lot of stuff because I don't want to, I know a lot of the really fun of a game is discovering that by yourself when you're playing a game, or for yourself. You get that instead of hearing the people who made it. But I also recognize that, that's a part of the reason why you guys are here. You want to know what the fuck we're doing and why we're doing it. So that's where it kind of clicked for me. And I was like, I can omit some details, mostly execution of how we're doing these things, but I can talk about grand vision. It was really nice to have you guys respond positively to it and that you guys were excited about what we were talking about. So I really appreciate that. Queen Anne's working on Endless U. Turning Cog, do you have a name for your game, or are you just passion project? Because you should talk about your game too. The Mortal Shell thing too. Yeah, dude. Mega Mocap, that's been the thing he's been working on for, I want to say, a year and a half, maybe 2. He's been hardcore in that shit on a very small dev team. It's been very cool chatting with him about his experiences. Mortal Shells, it looks good, man. I'm very excited for it. Turning Cog has no name for his game. All good, brother. Whenever you want to talk about it, we're happy to to talk to you, or to share your stuff using our channels and whatnot. We're totally cool with that. Still struggling with the vibe and art perfect scale. Yeah, that's like, as Tony was saying, it's not that we haven't been working on it. It's more that we're trying to solve big technical problems that are not necessarily interesting. I know that some of you guys say it is, but if we show this shit on stream, I guarantee you guys would be like, it'd be fucking crickets.
I mean, a lot of days right now, it's me being unable to do anything on my computer that requires any sort of processing power because I'm letting HLODs bake for like 6 hours, and it's using 62 gigs of RAM and like 90% of my GPU and CPU. And that's just kind of the way it is right now. And hopefully once we get that figured out, then I won't have to do that stuff anymore. But
yeah,
it wouldn't be very fun to stream, that's for sure. And I don't think my computer could push a stream signal out while it was happening. So
I think the best way to think about where Hyperskate is now is that we started with what I've called intrinsic fun. Is it fun to play this in the most basic version of the game? And we've got video showing, like, we have tons of video. We're working on a devlog series that we want to put out too on the YouTube, but you can see the very beginning of Hyperskate to where it is now, and it's very different. But we're kind of in that middle stage of like, okay, we have the vision, we know what we want to make, we know what things we need to make, we need to accommodate the technology for the perf targets we want to hit. And once we get that solid and figured out, then we can start adding in all the shit that makes it look really pretty, and it sells the idea better, right? So that's kind of where we are in like that part of the process. So I would say this is like middle chunk of it. And that's when we solve these problems, we're going to start putting a lot more in, and we'll be able to, you kind of build up to this point, and then the downhill is just adding everything in and play testing and making sure the game gets to where you want it to be before you ship it. So that's where we are right now. Damn Gangsta? Hell yeah, bro. I'm assuming that's the name of your game. Damn Gangsta.
He's probably talking about my HLOD baking process.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, totally. I was just fucking around. But yeah, all right. I think we're good for stream today, and we will. Yep. Oh, Hyperons, I saw you dropped a new trailer. We'll go check that out. But yeah, thank you everybody. What are we doing tomorrow? Do we even fucking know?
I don't think we know yet, but
yeah, if you guys want to see a game, I always
got my list to fall back on. But if anybody in our lovely community has any suggestions, please put them into Discord, and we will take them under consideration. Otherwise, there will be gaming happening here at 2 p.m. tomorrow of some sort.
Yes, sir. We will see you guys then, and all you wonderful people. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for chatting with us. Love the conversation. Thank you for the excitement around Hyperskate. Thank you for the support as always. Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm happy to talk more about this stuff. If you guys like have questions about it or whatever, like, please, we're always happy to talk about Hyperskate. We want to talk about it more. Yeah. Made one for Summerfest. A trailer or something? Yeah, never mind. It's fine. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We love you guys. Thank you so much.